Thank you for joining us on this very important and special bonus episode of the Right to Reason podcast. Time is of the essence, and you need to know what is happening in Iran right now. Our guest today is going to tell you things your news will not tell you. You also will be asked to get this message out to more people. Believe it or not, doing so will save lives. Armin Navabi from the Atheist Republic will explain why that is the case. Yes, you heard me correctly. This is the one of those very rare opportunities where you can actually help someone overseas in a real-life crisis and without spending a dime. Spread this to as many people as you can. Armin's message is powerful and needs to remain prevalent.
This is Armin Navabi, and I'm here to let you know that you have the right to reason.
In a little over 30 minutes from right now, you will know everything you need to know about the Iranian protest and what you can do to help.
For the third day in a row, they are out on the streets. Fighting with police went on into the night. Anti-government protesters, most of them students, facing up to riot police outside Tehran University. But what began as a protest about rising food prices and welfare benefit cuts turned political on Saturday. Earlier in the day, they chanted, "Not Gaza, not Lebanon, my life for Iran. Don't be afraid, we're staying strong together." An expression of anger about claims the government is focusing more on regional issues than economic problems at home. Iranian TV showed a display of strength by crowds of pro-government supporters in cities nationwide. Tens of thousands of people on the streets chanting "Death to America, down with Israel" in support of Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei.
People have protested against inflation and other problems, but that does not show that our people have turned on each other or are against the ruling system and their leadership.
Armin Navabi is a former Muslim from Iran and the founder of Atheist Republic, a nonprofit organization with over 1 million fans and followers worldwide that is dedicated to offering a safe community for atheists around the world to share their ideas and meet like-minded individuals. Armin, I'm really happy to have you on today, and what I was hoping I could talk to you about, because you would be the guy that would know this. What's going on in Iran right now?
Well, what has been going on for the past few days is a whole bunch of protests, very surprisingly, it's something people didn't expect it, and spontaneous protests all around Iran, starting from Mashhad. That was also very surprising. I don't know if your listeners know, but in 2009 there was a whole bunch of other protests that got a lot of international attention. It was called the Green Movement. That one started, in the capital. But these ones seem very different in message, in purpose, and the lack of leadership in them are very interesting. The size of the protest is very interesting. The reaction of the government to it is very interesting. It took everybody, almost everyone, by surprise, including myself. And I mean, it's much less right now than before. I've seen some reports of them in some corners. Stuff is still happening, but it's much less right now. For 2 days, it wasn't being covered. It was just a few of us on Twitter and on social media sharing it, and we were kind of surprised on the lack of coverage that it was getting on the news. A lot of reporters reporters that we saw, they were begging the mainstream news to cover it. Eventually, it caught their attention. But it took 2 days, and these were not small. This was not small. These were protests, major protests, and it was a big deal. So I don't really know. Maybe it was because it was New Year's, and I don't know why it wasn't getting coverage. Maybe because of Trump's tweets. It was too interesting for people to pay attention to this. But eventually, people realized that this is a big deal and started covering it.
The protests in Iran are the largest since 2009, but they are very different. These ones began in Iran's second largest city, Mashhad, as a focused rally, yet spread fast and far nationwide, encompassing many more grievances. The protesters are mainly young and some are working class, traditionally the government's support base. But while the 2009 protest was largely the middle class opposition angry at an election they considered rigged, this is something less predictable, less anticipated. Why are so many furious young people on the streets? Well, three reasons really, and the first is jobs. About a quarter of those under 25 are unemployed. There are dashed hopes too. The nuclear deal didn't lift sanctions in the way that people hoped, and social media is giving youth a glimpse of an outside world they cannot afford or share in. And finally, even President Rouhani himself admits people also want less repression. The immediate spark has been price rises. Even eggs are affected. Inflation's high, and a new budget wants to cut subsidies on some basics, but the ruling clerical elite are still getting generous state funding. Nobody really saw this coming. Iran's regional influence is at a peak. Trump's pressure to scrap the nuclear deal and up the ante is opposed by the US's European allies. But all the same, this hasn't healed Iran's internal rifts.
But now they're not, in news on it is dying out again. And the problem with that is that now is the government's reaction to it is going to be very scary to see, because, you know, the government sometimes just waits a little bit until the international media stops covering the news, and then it starts going after the people that participated in the protest. And now without interest in the news again, I'm scared to see what's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be as brutal as what they did in 2009, but yeah, we could go into the details of what happened, why it happened, which is very like even right now people are fighting over the reasons behind it and what happened and, you know, why it happened. But there seems to be some common trends. And but yeah, I mean, this is something a lot of people are discussing. A lot of people that have been following this have been discussing, and there's a lot of disagreements on it. But there are some opinions that seem to be more prevalent than the others. I mean, and also the thing is that it's hard to get really good data from the ground, right? Because obviously the government doesn't let you go get official polls and stuff like that. But the only the only thing that we could rely on is when we talk to the protesters themselves, and obviously that's not going to be a scientific data, but it's the best we have, right? So I mean, I've been talking to a lot of protesters, a lot of people from Iran. I've been trying to translate as many of the chants as I possibly can. I've been, you know, downloading the videos that people send on Telegram and on their own Twitter accounts in Persian, and I've been translating them and posting them. And, you know, there was only a few people that were doing it, and because there was not that many people doing it, a lot of these went really afterward really went viral. And one of the ones that went viral was the tweet that I posted of the girl that took off her hijab.
Yes.
It was just a day before the protest started, which was quite a coincidence. But because it was in the same time, people turned it into the symbol of the resistance, right? And basically, she took off her hijab and she went and stood there in the street, and she had her hijab on a stick, and she was just waving it, right? And she's just waiting for somebody. I mean, she knew that she's gonna get arrested, but she was just. I mean, that was so. I mean, I don't know if she knows that she's turned into a symbol, because she got arrested shortly after. So I don't know how much access to information she has. I mean, we don't even know her name right now.
What kind of courage does that take, though, to know that the hammer's about to fall on you and still stand there, probably shaking?
Yeah, I mean, she seems pretty confident. She seemed pretty confident in what she was doing. And a lot of people in the protest also, I mean, the chance that people were making, it was so extreme. Like, these are things that I never thought anybody would have the balls to say in the streets of Tehran so publicly in front of camera. Like, the people that protested in 2009, so many of them were crushed and killed and tortured, and they would never say anything like this. They never said
what kind of stuff are they saying?
Like death to Khamenei. I would be, when I was in Tehran, which is more than 13 years ago, I would be more willing to tell somebody I don't believe in God in like secret and hush hush.
Right.
But I would, even in a hush hush situation with my friends, I would never say any shit about Khamenei, right? So, and I saw people, tearing down pictures of Khamenei and Khomeini and burning it. And I saw so many anti-religious chants. I saw people trying, the Basij, which is the volunteer militia of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC. They came and tried to, they were outmanned. They were surprised, right? So the one solution that they had is to come and shout Allah Akbar in loudspeakers to drown the protests out. But people, I saw every time somebody said Allah Akbar, they were like booing it and shouting at it. I saw some of the chants saying that, making fun of the Hussein ideal. Hussein is the most, one of the most, if not the most revered Imam in Shia Islam. And some of the chants were saying that these people are, Hussein is their chant, but rape is their culture. If it is their honor, and by rape they didn't mean it. They meant it in a symbolic way. And also some of the chants was, very interesting. They were saying, Istiqlal Azadi Jumhuriye Irani, which means independence, freedom, and Iranian Republic. And when people were chanting that, a lot of people didn't understand the significance of this chant, because the official slogan of the country is Istiqlal Azadi Jumhuriye Islami, which means independence, freedom, and Islamic Republic. So people were in the streets and chanting the slogan, but replacing the word Islamic with Iranian.
Wow. So this isn't just an economical or a political thing. Like this sounds like it has some kind of anti-religious sentiment to it. Is that fair?
Well, here's what so it started with some protests about the economy, right? And actually the interesting thing is that it started with protests by some conservatives against the reformists, the Rouhani regime. But then once the numbers grew, there's a safety in numbers, I guess, right? So people just took advantage of that, and a whole bunch of people with other grievances just joined in, right?
Right.
But the thing is, when you talk to you really have to talk to each protester, and they might give you different answers, right? But for a lot of people that I talked to, they didn't seem to think there's a difference between these issues, right? So for them, the problem with the economy and the political issues and lack of freedom and the fact that the government is spending time, energy, and resources in meddling in other countries in the Middle East rather than focusing on the country itself, it all comes from the clerics, right? It all comes from this Islamic regime. It all comes from the same source. It all comes from these people having their own religious and political agenda, which is not the people. The people is not their priority, right? So for a lot of people, like, they have a whole list of problems, but it's all the same thing. It's all the same. I mean, the separation of religion and politics is not felt at all. It's actually, as a child, for me, it was actually a foreign concept. Religion and politics is the same thing, right? In a country like Iran.
Pro-government rallies were pre-planned to mark the anniversary of the end of the unrest that shook the country in 2009. Unrest in Iran prompted several tweets from the US president on Saturday, warning oppressive regimes cannot endure forever. Many reports of peaceful protests by Iranian citizens fed up with the regime's corruption and its squandering of the nation's wealth to fund terrorism abroad. Iranian government should respect their people's rights, including rights to express themselves. The world is watching.
In terms of the cause behind what happened, I was just reading today from The Hill. It says Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, as you had referenced earlier, is blaming the United States and other nations for anti-government protests over the last week. In a way, is that kind of implying that this is our fault? And could that be true, or is this really the grassroots uprising from the Iranian people, as we would think?
It had nothing to do with the United States. Well, the only thing that it could have done with the United States is the fact that the sanctions. No, it had nothing to do with the United States in the sense that people's grievances, like there was no conspiracy or management or organization. There was nobody on the ground that was getting orders from the United States. This was people's problem with the Iranian government. This is just a standard line. Iran's government goes to blame everything on the United States and Israel, right?
Gotcha.
Everything, and it's just everything is. I mean, because their whole legitimacy is that the Iranian people backing are supporting them, right? That's how they go, and they need that legitimacy. And these protests is going to hurt their legitimacy in the Middle East, right? Because influence in the Middle East is based on their religious, authority, and they get their religious authority by being the de facto Shia regime, and that's how. And they have Shia proxies all around the Middle East. And if you really don't have your own people backing you up, you lose a lot of legitimacy, right? So this must be sold as a Zionist Western conspiracy from a minority group of people, and they say like the only protests that were okay are the ones that are about the economy, right? So the fact that it turned into something bigger, that's what they don't like, right? It turned into something anti-religion, anti-government, anti-regime. And that's what they don't like. And the problem is that every time you allow people to come and complain about the economy, once the numbers grows, then people are going to join it and it's going to mention other things. But they want to highlight, so they send their own reporters in the street and they go find conservative protesters that did do the protest, but they only have economic complaints, and they just try to highlight them to take the attention away from people that just want the whole regime gone, right? So they want to be like, look, we're highlighting the protests. These are people with legitimate problems and we're issues, and we're listening to them, right? Those other people that are saying down with the regime, death to Khamenei, those are Zionist puppets or United States agents, right? But which is very sad because, you could see women and men crying in the streets talking about the fact that how much they have lost to this regime. And this is the government that's suggesting that these people have no agency. Anything that is against the government must be a foreign conspiracy, right? I mean, a lot of these people had a lot of hope once Obama, when Obama had the deal, and it wasn't just the United States; it was like 6 countries together. They came, and the sanctions were relaxed on Iran. A lot of people thought this is going to bring investments to Iran. It's going to bring a lot of jobs to Iran. A lot of foreign countries are going to become interested in bringing business to Iran. But not only didn't that happen, they saw that their government started, increasing its influence in countries like Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, right? And people were like, they thought that maybe, any benefit that they got from any of this that's what a lot of people on the ground said is going to these other countries, right? I mean, Iran is trying to basically create this Shia crescent around. It's building a Shia empire, right? That's what it's trying to do, right? It's with the fall of Syria now, basically they have a complete ground, line right from Iran, going to Iraq. They basically own the Shia part of Iraq right now. They have so much influence in Iraq, it's crazy. And then to Syria and right all to Lebanon, which is right in the borders of Israel, right? And this is something that Israel finds very scary, that Iran has such a direct line from its own borders now to Israel. But So and Saudi Arabia is scared as well, because if you look at the Shia crescent, it's all around Saudi Arabia. It's routed from south, from Yemen, then all around Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia it's feeling Iran's presence growing. That's why the Saudi Arabia were cheering these protests. I saw so many Saudis sharing tweets that were anti-Islamic, but they didn't care because it was anti-Iranian and they were sharing it, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, it was. There were so many, and Saudi's news agencies were covering these protests so much because they were so happy. They had everything they tried against Iran. Saudi Arabia has backfired, and has made Iran more powerful. So this was giving them a lot of hope. Iran is getting more and more powerful, and this, think about it. Saudi Arabia and Israel were uniting against Iran. Think about how big of a threat Iran is becoming to both of these countries, that for the first time you have a country like Saudi Arabia and Israel uniting. This is the only thing that could bring Arabs and Jews together, is their fear of the Shias.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And, the other weird thing that seems to be happening right now is Trump sounds like he's just so supportive of this uprising, but it seems kind of hypocritical to me, because weren't Iranian people part of the Muslim ban, the travel ban that he was trying to push through?
Yeah, and that's what a lot of the message I'm getting from there as well. I saw a few message of people wanting that and supporting, being happy with what Trump said, but most of the people were calling it bullshit, because they said you are the person that had a ban on all of us. You want more sanction on us, and that's going to make our lives worse. That's going to make the economic conditions worse in Iran. The sanctions doesn't hurt IRGC. A lot of people actually suggest that it helps. The sanctions helps IRGC, because less competition. When you have sanctions, that means less trade with foreign countries. When you have less trade with foreign countries, IRGC has a lot of influence in Iran's economy. Some people suggest 1/3 or up. 1/3 of Iran's economy is under IRGC's control. I don't know what exactly those numbers are, but if you have less competition with foreign entities, then your monopoly is safe, right?
Right.
So with these sanctions, it's the people that suffer, and IRGC, it helps IRGC, right? So yeah, basically. But so targeted sanctions against IRGC, some people say they are a lot more helpful. But again, people in Iran actually, a lot of them don't like Trump because of these travel bans and other things that he mentioned, and the fact that he wanted to increase sanctions. And people in Iran don't like Saudi Arabia either. And it was interesting because from the very first day of I think it was the second day of the sanctions, Iran's TV was showing people how happy Saudi Arabia is and how happy Trump is. And it was basically showing the protesters, look at who you're making happy. Look at these people that are joyful because of your actions, right?
Iranian state TV showing buildings ablaze Monday as protests in Iran stretched into their 5th day. More than a dozen people have been reportedly killed in what have become the biggest anti-government demonstrations to hit the nation in almost a decade. Iranian officials said a protester shot and killed a policeman during Monday's protests, the first reported fatality among security forces struggling to contain the unrest. This video posted on social media showing a group of protesters confronting a water cannon. Here, video shows large crowds of people taking to the streets of the capital Tehran, where dumpsters and cars were set on fire. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani trying to downplay the violent demonstrations, which began on Thursday over economic hardships and alleged corruption, and have since spread across his country to 50 other towns and cities, leading to hundreds of arrests. He appeared on TV Sunday to call for calm, saying Iranians had the right to criticize authorities but must not cause unrest. On Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted, quote, "The great Iranian people have been repressed for many years. Time for a change." Rouhani responded saying Trump has no right to sympathize with Iran. In a video posted to Facebook, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the, quote, brave Iranians for protesting a regime that he says, quote, wastes tens of billions of dollars spreading hate. The protests that erupted Thursday are the biggest challenge to the authority of the Tehran regime since mass demonstrations in 2009. Some of the recent anger even directed at Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, breaking a taboo surrounding the man who has been supreme leader since 1989.
Some people were even suggesting that maybe Trump saying these things is not helpful because it helps the government's narrative that this is Netanyahu also said something, and they said that this helps the government's narrative that this is a U.S. or Israeli conspiracy. But some other people said to that, like, no, that's not true, because even if they didn't say that, that would still be their narrative, right? So people have mixed feelings over it. People said like it would be worse if he was like Obama. A lot of people were upset with Obama because when in 2009 when the Green movement happened, Obama really didn't back the protesters, and many Iranians feel betrayed by that. Some reports even suggest that he even stopped some people in the government from that were trying to help the free Iranian movements in Iran. I don't know how true that is, but they say that he stopped it because he was working on his deals with Iran and he didn't want to jeopardize those. So a lot of people, whether it's true or not, a lot of people in Iran heard these stories and believe it, and they feel betrayed by Obama. So some people are saying that maybe Trump saying that was a good thing because it wasn't like Obama, but a lot of other people are saying but what Trump's support for Iranian people has nothing to do with the fact that he supports Iranian people. It has more to do with him being anti-Obama, and he was basically trying to do the exact opposite of what Obama did. So again, I get mixed responses. But most of the responses that I get is that they don't want Trump support, but they do appreciate American people's support, and coverage of it, and they think they need that. But again, what I hear from people is not a scientifically collected data, right? So just because what I hear most doesn't really suggest whether this is a good, accurate representation of what the average what the average numbers are in Iran.
Right. In terms of them saying that they at least, whether or not they appreciate Trump's support, they at least appreciate United States support, the people in the United States. What can we do? Is there a good source to share to get this message out there? Is there a place that people can send donations to, or what's the next step?
Well, there's no donation. One thing people want is this story not to lose its attention, especially now when people now are in jail and the government is going to start bringing down sentences on these people. If these stories dies, if these stories starts getting attention, they're going to feel like they're going to be able to get away with more, with less international pressure. So sharing the stories, I mean, news agencies, when they see stuff being shared more, they have a lot of algorithms and bots there noticing how much coverage and story gets. And if they see, if CNN or BBC, or when they see something is getting more attention, they cover it more. So share these stories. Go right now and see, find the news article. Like, don't let this story die. Share it as much as possible. Talk about it as much as possible. Just make sure that we keep the attention on these stories. Also, anybody that is, if people like Mariam Rajavi, these people that are trying to claim leadership over it, don't share those. Don't let anybody hijack this. Anybody that seems like they're acting like they're leading this movement had no leaders. It was completely spontaneous. Just make sure you keep sharing this story as much as you can. There is no donations because there is no organization that was managing any of this, right?
Right.
So where would you can't you don't know who you're sending your money to if you're sending it to a foreign country, right? I mean, I guess there's this one organization, Center of Human Rights in Iran. I think they might be a good place to check. They're a reliable source, Center of Human Rights in Iran. Their stories are accurate, and they keep it updated. Right now, they're talking about the fact that actually, I'm looking at their articles that Iranians' relatives are going to prison, and they were blocking. They're going after the children right now, right? So a lot of the the protest was mostly
they're going after
young
children.
People. I mean, these were young people, right? I don't know how you define
like
children.
College students and stuff.
Yeah, college students, right? But so a lot of these kids now are in jail, and you can see so many pictures of videos of their parents now in front of the prisons, right?
Wow.
And they're not leaving until they see their kids. They don't know, one of them just recently died in prison for quote unquote mysterious reasons.
Oh my God.
But some of the parents were, when they were bringing the prisoners to jail, they were just sitting lying on the ground, not letting the vans to get in because there were their kids in there. So, I mean, once these young people get into jail, like if the attention on it stops, then the government gets away with more, right? So I'm just hoping that this story doesn't die. So anything you can do to keep the attention on these stories will help.
For some time now, there's been some disparate groups who've been protesting, whether it was savers who've lost their savings through these corrupt financial institutions, whether it's pensioners who no longer gain their pensions or have to live on reduced pensions, it's people who worried about the environment, it's women, it's all these groups, and they've been protesting, and you could see that their slogans are now becoming more radical. You could see that the atmosphere is getting tenser and tenser, and most of all, what you could see is that they no longer seem to have that fear from the security forces. They're at the end of their tether.
While this was a huge display of support for the Iranian leadership, the government will be concerned at just how quickly a protest about food prices could become political.
It's hard for us to relate to the courage required of these people to do what you're talking about, because to us, I think the closest understanding of this might be how African Americans were treated during the civil rights movement, or how students might have been treated during Kent State. These people are they're really risking their lives for this movement. And what I'm getting from what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but getting this message out might, in a way, even save lives, because as soon as the media goes silent on this, Iran gets to do whatever they want. The cloak gets pulled over, and then they really get to start stopping this movement with violence.
A lot of people think that Iran does whatever it wants and doesn't care about its international image, but it really does. It does really try to sell this idea that the Iranian people are behind it and back the government. It does that a lot, and this has damaged that image a lot. And so because it does care about its international image, because it needs that for its legitimacy in other countries like Lebanon or anywhere in Iraq or anywhere else that is trying to gain influence. So because it cares about that international pressure, international coverage, why do you think they keep, during the protests, they go and slow down the internet, right? Because they don't want these stories to get, and they're very clever because, sometimes they don't shut down the internet. They just slow it down so much that they have effectively shut it down, but they know that the story of them shutting it down, that headline gets more shared than them slowing it down. So they just slow it down so much that nobody can get videos out. So, these kind of tactics show that they do care about their image. So international pressure and coverages of these stories does help. And regarding the courage that you mentioned, one of the chants that I kept on hearing in many of the videos was "Mimiram keshvaram mo migiram," which was, well, I will die unless I get my country back.
fighting for their freedoms. That's something that I would think any United States citizen could understand and would want to support. And I thank you for taking the time to help inform us about this today. How can people learn more about this, learn more about you, more about Atheist Republic?
Well, my personal Twitter account is at Armin Navabi. And there's my contact information is in my bio if you need to reach out to me. Atheist Republic, if you search for Atheist Republic on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on Google, if you search for it, our website will show up. And actually, if you go to atheistrepublic.com, what we have right now is on the homepage, there's a green button that if you click on it, you can record. It's a record button. And anybody could basically record their voice with whatever message they have.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and basically we have the Atheist Republic Voicemails podcast. It's called Atheist Republic Voicemails. It's basically a podcast with you subscribe to it too if you're interested. It's basically a podcast with no hosts. It's just voicemails after voicemails from atheists all around the world. Like, it's very interesting. Like, every episode, there's a whole bunch of different voicemails. One of them comes from Philippines. The next one comes from Pakistan. Then from an atheist in Egypt. And then United States. And then Iran. It's basically just voicemails that you get an understanding of what atheist concerns and messages are from all around the world. And if you want to add your own message, just go to atheistrepublic.com and leave your message. And if you have a podcast app, you could just search for it. It's called Atheist Republic Voicemails. The goal of it is just basically to democratize activism. Basically, everybody gets to be on a podcast this way, every atheist. I'm basically trying to give everybody a voice this way.
Armin Navabi, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate Armin for helping provide a perspective of this terrifying and revolutionary time in Iran right now. Share this link with your friends and family. Visit atheistrepublic.com. News clips for CNN, Reuters, and Al Jazeera. Music brought to you by A Lost State of Mind. Support this broadcast at patreon.com/right or visit our webpage at therighttoreason.com. I say this to you and to our friends in Iran fighting against religious oppression and for their civil liberties, and I mean this right now more than I've ever meant it before. You have the right to reason.